Good evening, I'm Jim Lara. On the NewsHour tonight, full coverage of the decision to take 2 diet drugs off the market. A look at what now in Bosnia with Senators Biden and Hutchison, and a report and a debate about bilingual education. It all follows our summary of the news this Monday.
Major fun.
Finally tonight, the debate over bilingual education. We begin with this report by Betty Ann Bowser.
Like millions of second graders, Antonio Pena is learning to read. His vocabulary is improving and his handwriting is growing steadier. But his education still isn't typical because he's doing it all in Spanish. Pena is one of a growing number of American students who learn basic skills in their native languages before adding English. It's called bilingual education. Pena's teacher, Claudia Beck, says it's important for him to learn the basics in Spanish.
Antonio, he knows a lot of English, he understands a lot of English, but still, he's still learning concepts in his in his language, in his native language. You know, concepts in science, you know, life cycles of animals are all concepts. And once we have that idea in our mind, then we can attach vocabulary to it.
Since 1974, all schools that accept federal funding must provide special language programs to students like Pena. But the number of students in these programs has grown so dramatically that many districts are strapped for bilingual teachers and texts. Across America, more than 2.8 million public school students do not speak fluent English. That number has soared 100% in the past decade. With the explosive growth has come disappointing statistics. Nationally, 40% of students who have difficulty speaking English never complete high school.
Did you get back from the schools?
Education professor Roland Tharp says the problem has forced many districts to take a closer look at their bilingual programs.
It's happening everywhere, and it's being faced by school boards, sometimes at the state level. It's being re-examined as to what kinds of programs should be prescribed or what should be the range of options. There's a great deal of re-examination going on.
In Antonio Pena's school in Denver, there's a heated debate over the best way to teach bilingual children. This month, the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights charged that Denver's school district violated federal law by providing an inadequate education for students with limited English skills. The federal reprimand came as Denver proposed to strengthen test scores with a new Get Tough program. 3 years and you're out of bilingual class. Irv Moskowitz, whose own parents had to learn English when they emigrated to the United States, is the superintendent of Denver schools.
What we're saying is that 3 years ought to be that serious time for check. Let's get a snapshot, profile of where is this kid at this point. I mean, this child or this young person's in there for 3 straight years. What has happened?
Denver officials say too many students have been isolated in bilingual classes.
Let's talk about a 16, 17-year-old, or one who's about to graduate. And this kid is had plenty of this bilingual program, never really been in trouble, you know, not been absent a lot, has some D's and some C's and some B's, but mostly C's. He's really young Mr. Average and about to graduate from school, really having a hard time with English. Can speak it, can read it, but really not on top of it. Where is this kid going? What's in store for this youngster?
In Denver, the dropout rate for Hispanics is 50%, far higher than any other ethnic group. Defenders of bilingual programs say any cutbacks will only encourage more Spanish-speaking students to quit. Hispanic activist Patricio Cordova is worried about the new plan.
30% of all Latino students are in the bilingual program. If you look at Latino students in general, if we are about half of the population, And if our graduation rate is less than 50%, then if you project that subset 10 or 20 years down the road, we have 1/4 of that segment of the population which does not have a high school education. And the statistics show that for people 18 years and over with less than a high school education, the average yearly earnings are only about $6,000 or $500 per month. Moreover, 82% of all prisoners in this country are high school dropouts, et cetera, et cetera. So the implications are enormous.
In this district, the board and the administration has sabotaged bilingual education religiously.
In an emotional public hearing, bilingual supporters said the proposed time limits will turn kids into victims.
Si son limitados sus derechos como individuos bilingües,
If their rights as bilingual individuals are limited, they will end up adding them to the lines on the streets. Is this what you want? To see Hispanics as bad statistics?
That's what school board member Rita Montero used to think. An original supporter of bilingual education, Montero enrolled her own son in the program, but abruptly pulled him out after being disappointed in his second grade studies.
He was bringing home pieces of paper that he had written, the number 1 across the sheet of the paper, number 2 across the sheet of the paper, and this child was adding 3-digit numbers. He was doing a little bit of fractions, a little bit of multiplication, and so to be writing a number 1 across the sheet of paper was just not doing it. So I said to the teacher, this is it. I want him to be taken out and put in an English-speaking class.
But many parents want their children to maintain Spanish so they can be proud of their cultural heritage. Montero says she too struggled with the issue.
I had to think, what is more important to me? To keep my child in a program where perhaps he'll learn some Spanish and that'll make me happy. Or do I want my child to be able to come out of public education with the ability to compete for scholarships, to be able to go to the college of his choice?
Academic success is exactly what bilingual educators say they strive for. Kathy Escamilla, who instructs bilingual teachers, says 3 years isn't enough time.
There's absolutely no evidence that a person can learn a second language in 3 years. We have, 500 studies that tell us that it takes from at least 5 to 7 years to become orally proficient in a second language, and by the 7th year, your reading and writing in a second language can approach that of a native English speaker.
Antonio Peña's mother, Maria, agrees. Maria Peña says her children have thrived in their bilingual classes, and their Spanish instruction allows her to help with their learning at home. And educators all agree that support at home is essential. Maria's daughter, Denise, has been in bilingual programs for 6 years. Peña says her daughter is ready to move on. But Antonio is just completing his 3rd year, and his mother says he's a long way from joining the English mainstream.
Antonio no está listo para moverse al inglés.
Antonio is not ready to move to English only because his foundation in Spanish is not yet good.
Superintendent Moskowitz is not convinced. He says there's more and more conflicting evidence of how long it takes to move into English-only classes.
You can go into research in bilingual education and find backing any theory you'd like to espouse. And then it gets quoted as biblical. In the meantime, right on someone who says something 180 degrees different in a different way.
Escamilla disagrees.
The research isn't controversial and it isn't inconclusive. There's very clear evidence that the kids who have a strong foundation in their native language, it takes 5 to 7 years to become proficient in English, and those are the kids who are likely to do well in school.
Denver officials say those who do not learn in 3 years will get individual attention. But some say the problem is not the length of time spent in bilingual. It's the fact that so many bilingual teachers aren't properly prepared.
When you have an inability to educate kids even in their own language because you have staff that's unqualified, how are we then going to educate kids and turn them out to be literate in 2 languages when we don't have enough qualified staff to do it?
In Denver, officials say they are beefing up the quality of the program by hiring more qualified teachers. But Professor Tharp says the overall record is spotty. because states often ignore and underfund programs.
Everybody's trying to scurry off and do bilingual education without knowing how to do it or what it is or any agreement about what it's done. So everybody's doing something and everybody's saying we're doing bilingual education, and then go out and measure it, and to the big surprise, doesn't really seem to be doing very much better than not doing bilingual education. The school average looks to me better than it has.
His research center at the University of California, Santa Cruz, is searching for the nation's most successful bilingual programs.
Círculo. Okay.
Meanwhile, in Denver, officials hope they can enact their new plan when students return to school this fall.
From KDVR's News and Technology Center, this is Fox 31 News at 9 o'clock.
And is bilingual education the way to go in Colorado? Neighbors to our west say they have proof the answer is no. That story before 9:40.
Welcome back, and thanks for staying with us. I'm Ron Zapolo.
And I'm Libby Weaver. A proposal to ban bilingual education almost made it onto the Colorado ballot this fall. And now supporters have a little extra ammunition. 2 years after California banned bilingual education and started English immersion programs, it seems the students' test scores have come up. For example, the second grade reading scores increased by 9 percentage points. The math scores increased 14 percentage points. Fox 31's Kim Posey takes a look at the impact here. It's tonight's Spotlight on Education.
Hola, mi nombre es Jorge. Hola, mi nombre es Miguel.
Here at Columbian Elementary School in Denver, about 1/6 of the students are taught in bilingual education classes.
It's easier for me in Spanish.
Vicki Ann Romero has taught this class for 9 years. She does teach the kids English, but academics are taught in Spanish, and she believes the 3-year transitional program works.
I teach first grade, and I see that children learn quicker in their native language and then start to make the transition into English.
Romero says she has a hard time believing that California's 1-year English immersion program is completely responsible for the increase in test scores.
I really need to see some proof, I guess.
But English immersion supporters say the proof is the test scores.
It showed me that it does work. We know it works.
Dentist Efren Martinez tried to get English immersion put onto Colorado's ballot this fall. He says he'll try again.
In 2004, we're going to try to get it on the ballot. And we want it to pass because California has shown what it can do.
In the next 4 years, these children will show what they can do, and it could determine if bilingual education survives. Kim Posey, Fox 31 News.
Well, the bilingual education issue will not be on the Colorado ballot this fall because the state Supreme Court decided the wording was unclear and misleading. Voters in Arizona will face a vote on banning bilingual education this fall.
From Denver's 7, Ann Trujillo, Bertha Lynn, Marty Caniglio, and Lionel Bienvenu. This is 7 News at 5.
Good afternoon, I'm Ann Trujillo. And I'm Bertha Lynn. Thank you for joining us. They come to Colorado from schools in countries such as Cuba, Mexico, Venezuela, even the former Soviet Union. But the way they're taught in our schools is now coming under fire. Today, a group announced it is going to work for a ballot initiative that would end traditional bilingual learning. At least 1 in 5 students in the Denver public school system starts classes knowing more Spanish than English. But this group says immersing them in their non-native language is a better way to learn than to keep them speaking Spanish, limiting them to substandard learning environments and opportunities. 7 News reporter Shannon Brinius has more.
This is how learning sounds to students whose first language is Spanish, not English. But some parents believe this style of learning is failing their kids.
He becomes confused. Cuando estudian bilingüe, when he's in the bilingual program.
Lupe Martinez saw her son's ability to learn falter when faced with the Denver system.
It's going to be very difficult for him. Él ha perdido mucho tiempo. He has lost a lot of time.
So now she's joining in the call for an end to traditional bilingual education.
We're here to ask that our kids be taught in English so that they could be competitive with all the other kids who are in Denver public schools.
Former school board member Rita Montero is heading up an initiative movement to demand 1-year immersion programs for Spanish speakers in all Colorado schools. They point to California, which made the change and had test scores improving and showing up in papers. After 2 years, second graders' reading scores went from the 19th to 28th percentile. Math scores jumped from the 27th to 41st percentile. But Denver educators aren't sure a state mandate is what's needed.
We as a school system need to do a better job at implementing the program that we have. That was Shannon Brinius reporting. Now, in its defense, the Denver public school system has already adopted a program that its leaders feel is closer to immersion than bilingual education. They think flexibility, not mandates, help students succeed. This initiative wouldn't go on the ballot until November of 2002, and the group is working on 2 versions to overcome any legal obstacles. Several other states already have eliminated bilingual education. Both California and Arizona dismantled their bilingual education programs, and Massachusetts is trying to put the issue on the ballot. Now, we want to know your opinion. Do you support bilingual education? Cast your vote at thedenverchannel.com and click on 7 News.
From Colorado's news leader, this is 9 News at 5.
Several parents of bilingual children launched a campaign today to get an initiative on the November ballot. If approved, it would dismantle Colorado's bilingual education system. The parents are part of an organization called English for the Children. 9 News education reporter Dana Knowles is joining us now. Dana, they say the state's bilingual programs are falling short. They're not giving their kids a proper education.
Or they're worried that when it comes time for their children to take tests like the SAT and ACT, they won't be prepared in the same way that English-speaking students are. And although this is a statewide initiative, the parents we spoke with today specifically targeted Denver Public Schools. Well, a spokesperson for DPS says their current program works. They came to the west steps of the Capitol building carrying signs that bear one message in 2 languages.
We want the system to let them be successful, and we're tired of people holding us back and holding our kids back.
A system they say hinders their children instead of helping them.
We're here to ask that our kids be taught in English so that they could be competitive with all the other kids who are in Denver Public School.
Rita Montero and other parents here are part of an organization called English for the Children. Their goal is to get an initiative on the November ballot that would eliminate Colorado's current bilingual education programs in public schools. Their main focus is Denver Public Schools.
I had a child who was placed in the program. They refused to take my son out, and I had to move him to another school that didn't have a native language instruction program in order for him to get the English instruction that I wanted.
Right now, DPS has 3 years to teach non-English speaking children the language, but these parents want that reduced to 1 year. Elaine Gantz-Berman is the president of the Denver Public School Board. She says DPS's current program is specifically designed to address the needs of individual children.
I feel to have a state mandate that dictates how individual school districts should be teaching children is not the way, I think individual communities probably know best how to address these situations.
Similar measures have passed in California and Arizona. Bilingual education has been banned in both of those states, but it isn't going to be easy to get this done. The organization will need more than 80,000 signatures from registered voters to get this initiative on the ballot. Ward, back to you.
All right, thank you. That's Dana Knowles reporting from our newsroom.
From KDVR's News and Technology Center, this is Fox 31 News at 9 o'clock.
Some say it's a system that fails children. Others say it's time those children learn to speak English. The debate over bilingual education before 9:45. Opponents of bilingual education have taken the first step in eliminating the system in Colorado. Today, a group called English for the Children of Colorado filed a proposal for a statewide ballot initiative. In tonight's Spotlight on Diversity, Fox 31's Tammy Vigil tells us about this mission to dismantle this decades-old program.
Hola, mi nombre es Jorge. At Denver Public Schools like this one, traditional bilingual education is already gone. Non-English speaking children have 3 years instead of 5 to 7 to learn English.
Any of us here are parents?
They say the current bilingual systems, which teach students in Spanish while they gradually learn English, fail students. like Lupe Martinez's son.
He's very intelligent and he learns well, but he's very behind in his studies.
She wanted her son to learn English right away, and that's what this initiative would accomplish, putting Spanish-speaking students in English for 1 year and then moving them into regular classes. It's already been done in California and Arizona.
We're talking about over 1 million immigrant students in California who've seen their test scores shoot up by an average of 40%
But there's a question about
in
whether
less than
other
2
changes
years.
in California's educational system contributed to higher test scores, like more money for schools, a change to phonics-based reading, and smaller classes.
I don't think we need a ballot initiative to mandate that children have to transition after 1 year. I think we need a little bit more flexibility.
But voters may make that call if English for the Children gets enough signatures to put the issue on the ballot. Tammy Vigil, Fox 31 News.
Now, the group has 1.5 years to get about 75,000 signatures.
From Colorado's news leader, this is 9 News at 10.
Several parents of bilingual children want to do away with Colorado's bilingual education program. They launched a campaign today to get an initiative on the November ballot. The parents are with an organization called English for Children. They say the state's bilingual programs are not giving their children a good education. Right now, Denver public schools are required to have their non-English speaking students learn the language within 3 years. These parents want that cut to 1 year.
Our kids cannot go to college because they're not going to pass the ACT or the SAT. There have been kids who have come to us and said, I'm going to Metro or I'm going to community college. I can't do it because I can't hardly speak any English.
Elaine Gans-Berman is the president of the Denver Public School Board. She says Denver's current program works because it addresses the needs of individual kids who all learn at different speeds.
I think we all know that each child learns differently. I've got 2 kids, they learn very differently, and one kid might learn within a year and it might take another kid 2 years. I don't think we want that kind of dictate that's so inflexible that doesn't meet the individual student's needs.
Measures banning bilingual education have passed in California and Arizona. The parent organization here needs to gather more than 80,000 signatures by the beginning of August to get its initiative on the ballot this fall.
You're watching Colorado's News Channel. This is News 4 this morning.
A national group has launched a campaign to dismantle Colorado's bilingual educational system. The group English for the Children announced a petition drive to replace the bilingual system with an English immersion system. The national chairman points to test scores in California, which he says went up dramatically after bilingual ed was scrapped. And he says that bilingual supporters need to accept that fact.
I challenge them to point to a single large-scale example of a successful bilingual program anywhere in America in 30 years. If they can't find one case where it's ever worked, maybe it just means that it doesn't work at all.
Now, this coming school year, 2 Denver schools will take part in a pilot program to help teach non-English speaking children.
From Denver 7, this is 7 News at 11.
At least 1 in 5 students entering the Denver public school system starts class knowing more Spanish than English. One group says immersing them in their non-native language is a better way to learn, rather than allowing them to keep speaking Spanish indefinitely. They say that limits students to substandard learning environments and opportunities.
This is how learning sounds to students whose first language is Spanish, not English. But some parents believe this style of learning is failing their kids.
He becomes confused. When he's in the bilingual program.
Lupe Martinez saw her son's ability to learn falter when faced with the Denver system.
It's going to be very difficult for him. He has lost a lot of time.
So now she's joining in the call for an end to traditional bilingual education.
We're here to ask that our kids be taught in English so that they can be competitive with all the other kids who are in Denver public schools.
Former school board member Rita Montero is heading up an initiative movement to demand 1-year immersion programs for Spanish speakers in all Colorado schools.
They point to California, which made the change and had test scores improving and showing up in papers. After 2 years, second graders' reading scores went from the 19th to 28th percentile. Math scores jumped from the 27th to 41st percentile. But Denver educators aren't sure a state mandate is what's needed.
We as a school system need to do a better job at implementing the program that we have.
In its defense, the Denver Public School System says it's already adopted a program that its leaders feel is closer to immersion than to bilingual education. They think flexibility, not mandates, will help students succeed.
Hi, I'm Peter Boyles from KHOW Radio, and welcome again to Colorado Inside Out. We got the grand old round table here. Boy, what a week it is here at Channel 12. What a week it's been for the city. First, as we always say, let us introduce our contestants. As always, she's my dear friend and my colleague from Westward, the lovely and talented Miss Patricia Calhoun. Next, a man who has not been at the table for a while, and as you know, the Busker Fest is taking place. Last year, Eric was downtown seeing a mime hit by the light rail, turning to me and saying, Peter, a mime is a terrible thing to waste. Ladies and gentlemen, Eric Sonderman.
You need a snare drum.
Thank you. Craig Silverman from Channel 7, also at the round table, and back, after popular demand, from your Denver Post. Ladies and gentlemen, the lovely and talented Miss Sue O'Brien. Bilingual education could be back on the ballot in Colorado. Opponents of bilingual ed have filed a ballot proposal that would severely curb using language other than English to teach subjects in public schools. Now, the measure would force students who do not speak English to be put into English immersion classes. Students whose parents then would sign a waiver could stay in bilingual ed. Now, this proposal would strike down many of the new programs now in use in DPS. Has the program had its run, and now it's time to try something different, or is the proposal premature? Would English immersion nullify the previous lawsuits that have forced DPS to include English-only classes in the classrooms? And this is complex one. Craig, it's yours.
First of all, when I'm not here or in court, I'm in my office listening to my partner, David Olivas, speak Spanish most of the day to various clients of our law firm. It is a tremendous asset, especially here in Denver, Colorado, to be able to speak both English and Spanish. But it is a disaster to only be able to speak Spanish in this society. And people need to recognize that, including the public schools. I like this English immersion idea. Sure, Spanish is a very valuable language if you live in Mexico. It's valuable as a second language, but it's not going to change that English is the way in the United States, and to advance, to fulfill your potential, you have to be fluent in English, and to deprive children of that is really doing them more harm than good.
Sue.
I, too, am a fan of immersion. Among other reasons, it works much better for all of the different immigrant groups. If you are from Thailand or Laos or Germany, an English immersion class will work for you as well as for a Spanish-speaking kid. The thing that worries me about the proposed initiative, and that I don't know enough about, is how inflexible it is. Because I think what DPS has done, DPS moved to an immersion philosophy 4 or 5 years ago. That was laudable and was highly controversial at the time. I think what DPS has done with the flexibility they offer and permitting bilingual for the second and third generation Hispanic families who want a cultural preservation, as permitting a bilingual option or bilingual charter schools, is also laudable. So I'm not willing on the ballot to lock in immersion only, if that's what how the initiative is written, and I don't know that.
Patricia.
Well, it's interesting with Rita Montero leading the charge here. The Hispanic community gets very divided over her. They did 5 years ago, but still, she is local. She knows the community. she at least will be able to address the issues as opposed to Stanley Utz, who brought it up in Arizona and in California.
Of the present DPS program.
Right, so a lot of this depends on how much she pushes through the wording, how much it's locally driven as opposed to being an out-of-state thing. But I think just listening to Craig and listening to Sue, I think it has a very good chance of passing here if there's some flexibility.
Well said. Sir?
It's an issue about which I feel strongly. I'm the son of two parents, both of whom came to this country not speaking a word of English, both of whom learned English by being immersed in it. I think the only ticket to success in this country is to learn English. I think that the current bilingual education program, Peter, has a lot more to do with politics and political statements than it does with language proficiency. I support the initiative.
What will happen with this? What do you think?
I think you're seeing a consensus among diverse personalities. I had the pleasure at Colorado College of being taught by Professor Sonderman, Eric's father, and he was an outstanding teacher in English. So, you know, that's the way to get ahead. It's always been the way. It's not exclusive to Spanish-speaking people.
I'm asking to you real quick around the table. If it's on the ballot, will it have support?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, I think it has huge huge emotional support.
This is the State of Colorado with Ed Sardella. Issues of this week with reporters who cover Colorado. Funding for the State of Colorado is provided by the Monfort Family Foundation. Now, here is Ed Sardella.
Good evening. How long must we wait to hear if Mayor Webb is going to run for the Senate? Lynn Bartles of the Rocky Mountain News. Tom Strickland is tired of waiting. Could there be an ugly primary in the Democrats' future? Lynn will also talk with us about the effort to do away with the bilingual education program in Colorado in its present form. We may be voting on it next year. Traffic is down at DIA. United profits are down. In fact, they're losing money. Heather Draper of the Rocky Mountain News. To make matters worse, bad weather this week knocks many planes out of service. Are we free to navigate any stream in Colorado we want, or do property owners have the right to stop us? Jason Blevins of the Denver Post. Colorado has been slow to answer that question. Level 3, a telecom company, announces layoffs amid hard times for much of the industry. Jeff Smith of the Rocky Mountain News. The head man at Quest says, don't paint us with that brush. Now let's go back to Lynn Bartles for a second. An organization that wants to curtail bilingual education in Colorado hopes to get the question on the ballot. And in simple terms, this is a question of how long does it take to teach a student, Hispanic primarily, that speaks a foreign language. How long does it take to teach that student English and get that person in the mainstream?
Well, and what you have is you have people who say, look, if you're going to take kids and you're going to put them into school and they speak Spanish, let's say, but you're going to teach them in Spanish and all that, they're going to end up leaving school thinking, writing, reading in Spanish, and they're not going to know English. And what they did this time is they said, let's recruit, because this was tried before and it was a timing glitch and all that, but they said, let's recruit Colorado Hispanics who support this. So it doesn't look racist, even though the other group says this is absolutely just racism in a different, color. I mean, the people who support this ballot initiative said, we are not against bilingualism. We think it's important, but you should learn Spanish at home and learn to read and write Spanish at home. But when you go to school, you should learn English so that you can compete and have a job. They said they have students that come to them and say, I can't get into Metro, I can't get into CU, I can't get into all these schools because I can't take the ACT.
Now, the standard bilingual program is 3 years, is that right?
I'm actually not that great on that. I get thrown into that assignment. I'm not the education reporter.
So, but the alternative is immersion. In other words,
right,
let's
you do
just...
it really quickly.
Yeah.
You know, kind of like reporting. Today IRA. Political expert.
And there really isn't any definitive proof or evidence that proves either side. The jury's still out.
Well, that's not what the people who support this initiative say. They say that in California, the test scores among the students who had been in bilingual and are now in immersion have jumped 40%. And they've actually jumped 50% when you count the districts where they overwhelmingly supported it instead of fought it and kind of did it, half, whatever.
What also is interesting, though, is Colorado's initiative, they submitted kind of two things. Here's the one we want, and if that one doesn't fail, let's just do the bilingual.
Yeah.
I actually think it has a great chance of passing in Colorado, except they attached the $50 million price tag on it. So, and I think somebody who says, yeah, I really believe, you know how you have the let them learn English, they live here concept, but you look at that, and you hear all the economic news here. I mean, United's suffering, Level 3 suffering, everybody's suffering, except me, because I invest my money in Visa, you know, so mine goes up every month. But you see what happens there. I mean, if you go into the ballot and you look at this and you say, I want to get rid of it, but do I want to spend $50 million teaching their parents to speak English? No.
So they like the concept, they don't like the cost. Or
Well,
might not.
I think. Yeah. The issue is whether that'll pass, because there's is this two issues they're trying to push under one, and you can't do that.
80,000 some signatures needed. How long do they have to gather them to get it on the ballot?
I don't know.
They're just in the beginning
Ed, don't
stages.
ask me any facts, just
No facts.
general opinion.
You're watching Colorado's News Channel. This is News 4 at 5.
This is what our schools sound like.
Cinco más dos son
Some speak Spanish, others English. But should one language dominate the classroom? The state is bracing for a battle over bilingual education. Do students learn better in one language versus another?
The debate of bilingual education and its merits has landed dead center in Colorado. Here's why. Nearly 1/4 of all students in the Denver public school system speak Spanish. If bilingual education is erased, many of those students would enter English immersion classes instead. The question is, which method works best? News 4's Terry Jessup is live at the Capitol with details on the debate. Terry?
Teresa, this issue of bilingual education is so sensitive that very few politicians like to say a whole lot about it. That's why in California and in Arizona, efforts to limit dual education programs went straight to the ballot box, and they were approved by voters in those states. And that's what's very likely to happen here in Colorado. And even opponents agree if it does make it to the ballot in Colorado, it is very likely that it will pass.
Virtually every other country in the world that has a large immigrant population teaches the children in that country the national language of that country as quickly as possible.
California millionaire Ron Unz, head of the group English for the Children, wants to dismantle Colorado's bilingual education system and replace it with an English immersion program that would teach kids English in 1 year. Former Denver School Board member Rita Montero agrees.
So it's time to stop playing around. We've given this, bilingual education 25, 30 years to make a go of it.
California and Arizona have already adopted the proposal Unz and Montero want to put on the Colorado ballot in November of 2002.
This is a mistake. This would be divisive.
Gully Stanford from the State Department of Education was at the state capitol meeting today where the ballot proposal to limit dual language education was being hammered out.
Local control here is the issue. We really don't need somebody to hopscotch in from out of state and say Colorado is his next target for a one-size-fits-all straitjacket solution.
But Montero, who says she was forced to keep her own son in a Denver bilingual program that wasn't working, says Unz's proposal is getting results in California.
Their scores have risen by 40%, so there's proof out there already.
Students who come here from Mexico at an older age many times have received more English in Mexican schools than they subsequently receive in Colorado or California schools. And I think that's absurd and should be changed.
Now, Colorado has about 800,000 public school students statewide, 70,000 of them here in Denver, slightly more than half of those Hispanic, and I'm told about 16,000 of those Denver public school students speak Spanish only. As for those who want to change the current system, they will have to gather 80,000 signatures to get this on the November 2002 ballot. The opposition, which claims that bilingual programs in Colorado are working well right now, is promising a vigorous fight. For one, they say local control is the issue, and they will go to court to maintain that local control. Teresa?
A lot of families affected, Terry, and Colorado is not the first state to battle over bilingual education. California and Arizona have already dismantled their bilingual education programs. Lawmakers in New York, Massachusetts, and Texas are also considering bans on bilingual education.
From Colorado's news leader, this is 9 News at 6.
A battle over English and Spanish at the state capitol today. A group called English for the Children filed the paperwork to get an initiative on the ballot for voters in November 2002. Voters would decide whether or not to get rid of Colorado's bilingual education programs. Right now, most of the state's 178 school systems have a 3-year program where Spanish-speaking students are required to learn to speak English. English for the Children wants to reduce that time to 1 year. This morning, a legislative council held a hearing about the ballot proposal.
But my mother, on the other hand, came from something of an immigrant background herself. She grew up not speaking a word of English. She learned English very quickly and easily as a young child. And for that reason, I've always been very skeptical of these so-called bilingual education programs.
Those who oppose the initiative say Colorado's bilingual education system is working well, and Spanish-speaking children need more time to make the transition to English. The Colorado Board of Education may decide to oppose the English for the Children initiative.
Live from the world headquarters of Fox News, the most powerful name in news, the Fox Report with Shepard Smith. Fair news, balanced news, now.
They came here from another country, just like most all of us. They don't speak English, but American schools must educate them. So what do? Do you talk to them in English, or at least work toward it, or just have classes in their native tongues? English immersion. In a Fox Report now from Carol McKinley.
The bilingual education does not work.
Ron Unz says he has a better way. English immersion places immigrant children into specialized English-speaking classrooms for a year, which forces them to learn English quickly. The current bilingual programs can drag on for years.
I've never understood why young immigrant children aren't taught English as soon as they start school.
Unz, whose mother was an immigrant, was the voice and money behind California's Proposition 227, which ended bilingual education there. He helped push the idea in Arizona. Now he's in Colorado, challenging the effectiveness of its bilingual education program.
And it's not working anywhere. Not here, not in Arizona, not in California, not in New York, not in New Mexico, and not in Texas.
Hispanic activist Rita Montero is Unz's point person in Denver, where 51% of students in Denver public schools are Hispanic. 40% of those are learning English.
It's our job at home to instruct them in Spanish or to maintain the Spanish language in our culture. It's not an institution's responsibility.
And this is definitely an issue about immigrants, I think.
Supporters of bilingual education say Unz's immersion English won't help students because 1 year isn't long enough.
We will see them sinking and drowning in a non-supportive educational environment, and like I said before, the number of school dropouts will increase, the number of illiterate students will increase.
But the numbers show English immersion is working. In 1 year in California, reading levels for immigrant students jumped from 19% proficiency to 28%, and math proficiency went up 14%. These positive results are getting notice in the Hispanic community.
I would hope in the near future, Congress or some national elected officials will take the lead on changing these programs nationwide.
Unz and his supporters hope to gather enough signatures to get his initiative on the ballot in Colorado in 2002. In Denver, Carol McKinley, Fox News.
From Colorado's news leader, this is 9 News at noon.
Two former members of the Denver Public School Board announced today that they will support the efforts of English for the Children. That's the organization that wants to end bilingual education in Colorado. Laura Lefkowitz and Len Coleman both say that bilingual education students across the state are not getting an adequate education. They and other English for the Children supporters believe bilingual children don't have enough support in their classrooms. Those opposed to the statewide initiative say, obviously, there are problems within the system, but that dismantling a bilingual education would impose a one-size-fits-all learning process for those students.
Bilingual education does not work. It relegates kids to a lower status in the educational arena.
It purports to be a simplistic solution which would apply to all 178 school districts, 52,000 or so students, English language acquisitions, speaking up to 90 languages in Denver.
The English for the Children group will meet with the Secretary of State next week. Their goal is to have voters eventually decide whether or not to end bilingual education here in Colorado.
From Colorado's news leader, it's 4 o'clock at 9 News.
English for the Children, the group that hopes to end bilingual education in Colorado, has just recruited 2 former Denver Public School Board members. The group made the announcement earlier today on the west steps of the Capitol. Laura Lefkowitz and Lynn Coleman both say that bilingual education students across the state are not getting an adequate education. They and other English for the Children supporters believe that bilingual children don't have enough support in their classrooms. Those opposed to this statewide initiative say obviously there are problems within the system, but dismantling bilingual education would impose a one-size-fits-all learning process on those students.
I believe that the goal is, at the bottom, success for children, and English is the language of this country. It does not preclude that they would have another language, and I support dual language programs. I cannot support bilingual education, however.
We believe no less than the proponents here that our students must acquire fluency and proficiency in English. But we believe that they must acquire proficiency in English, but we believe that it's up to the locals and up to the committed partnerships of parents, teachers, businesses, legislators, and local board members to determine what the right strategy is.
The English for the Children group will meet with the Secretary of State next week. Their goal is to have voters eventually decide whether to end bilingual education in Colorado.
You're watching Colorado's News Channel. This is News 4 at 10.
And a proposed bill could force students not fluent in English to only speak English in the classroom.
A proposal to end bilingual education in Colorado is headed for the November ballot. We polled Colorado voters about the initiative, which would require all public school instruction to be conducted in English.
It would allow students who are not fluent in English to be placed in an intensive one-year immersion program to learn English. Now, if the election was held today, 66% of the people surveyed in our News 4 Rocky Mountain News poll would vote in favor of the initiative. 28% would oppose it. 6% undecided. Anna Alejo has more on the proposed constitutional amendment.
The group supporting the initiative calls itself English for the Children. Its members say immigrant students aren't well served when they're taught in English as well as in their native language. Bilingual education, they say, has been a failure. The initiative calls for quick English immersion for students who aren't fluent speakers.
I think that it's time that kids be given a chance to be able to succeed like all other kids, and the only way that will truly happen is if they have English language skills, and so that's all we want to do is give kids a fighting chance while they're in school.
The initiative's opponents have organized under the name English Plus. They say the amendment provides little direction for how to teach children who don't learn English through immersion.
1, I feel we do not need it. 2, I feel that it seriously interrupts the ability of the local community to set the curriculum for the students of their community.
California millionaire Ron Unz is helping fund the Colorado Ballot Initiative after leading successful campaigns in California and Arizona.
America is almost unique in having a policy of keeping children for years in native language-oriented programs.
Why is he trying to tell people in all these places what they need to do?
The real effort is being led by those of us who live here, and Ron wouldn't be here if we hadn't asked him to come.
This November, Colorado voters may have the final say on how best to educate the 61,000 students in the state whose primary language is not English. Anna Alejo, News 4.
The amendment would allow parents to apply for waivers for their children to be taught subjects in their native language. It does not affect foreign language classes for students fluent in English. You can read more about the Bilingual Education Ballot Initiative in tomorrow's Rocky Mountain News.
From the Winter Games in Salt Lake City and Colorado's news leader, it's 4 o'clock at 9 News.
A continuing controversy both in Colorado and across the country. It centers around bilingual education. A 9 News poll conducted by Cerulli Associates shows voters might not be very enthusiastic about bilingual education here in Colorado. 9 News education reporter Dana Knowles has more. Dana, people seem to want stricter guidelines for students whose second language is English.
Andrew, 70% of the voters said they'd like to see those students put into a program where they'd have 1 year to learn English. Educators who disagree say forcing children to learn a different language keeps them from getting a well-rounded education.
Okay, mis amigos, siéntense correctos.
This is Denver Public Schools' first and only dual language school.
Solamente el pozo.
Anna Marie Sandoval School was developed with the idea of giving students a chance to learn in 2 different worlds, English and Spanish.
Language is culture.
But a recent poll by Cerulli Associates shows voters across Colorado wonder how well programs like these actually work.
I think we can say it's a hot issue in Colorado, but I would venture to say it would be a hot issue nationwide.
600 voters were asked whether or not they'd support the issue. All school instruction would be only in English. Students not fluent in English would be placed in a 1-year immersion program. 70% supported it. The principal of Anna Marie Sandoval School believes it's disappointing.
For reasons unknown, our country really does not value individuals speaking more than one language. If we look at Europe, it's the norm. For children to grow up multilingual it's very normal for them.
Voters might get the chance to decide whether or not the 2 worlds of English and Spanish should become one in schools this November. English for the Children hopes to start gathering signatures to get this issue on the ballot this coming November. They'd like to get rid of current bilingual education here in Colorado. The group has already sponsored and been successful at similar initiatives in California and Arizona. Andrew, back to you.
9 News education reporter Dana Knowles, thank you very much.
You're watching Colorado's News Channel. This is News 4 at 10.
Bilingual education. A lot of lawmakers are talking about it at the Capitol, but will it become more than just talk? In a News 4 Rocky Mountain News poll, 68% said they would be in favor of an initiative to amend the state constitution so that students in public schools must be taught in the English language. 26% of those polled said they would be against such an initiative. 7% said they were undecided. You can read more about this poll in tomorrow's Rocky Mountain News.
You're watching Colorado's News Channel. This is News 4 at 5.
Should bilingual education be limited in Colorado schools? It's a question that may be up for a vote in November. While supporters are busy gathering signatures to make sure the controversial measure makes it on the ballot, opponents are lobbying to shoot it down. News 4's Terry Jessup has the story.
Under the ballot proposal, English learners would spend no more than 1 year in an English immersion course before moving into regular classes.
It was tough, you know.
Ulysses Alfaro came to the U.S. from Mexico 10 years ago with no English. The West High Junior says 1 year of instruction is not nearly enough.
I was in bilingual programs for about 6-7 years, and now I speak it fluently, but if I would have had to done it in 1 year, I don't think I would have succeeded.
But supporters of the ballot proposal say bilingual education courses lasting as long as 7 years have failed miserably.
I think immigrant children will do better because they'll be immersed in the language earlier, and the 1 year that they get is going to give them intensive English instruction, and it's going to give them a head start in learning English as opposed to keeping them all in Spanish.
Opponents of the ballot initiative are worried because of its success in other states. Similar measures in Arizona and in California passed by wide margins, and supporters say private polling here suggests that's what would happen in Colorado. That's one reason the Colorado Hispanic Bar Association is donating $10,000 to fight it.
We believe that this initiative is wrong, that it affects local control in schools, that it removes parents and communities' decision-making authority about the lives of their children.
To make the November ballot, supporters will have to turn in 80,000 signatures by August 5th. Terry Jessup, News 4.
According to a University of Colorado study, in 2000-2001, about 58,000 K through 12 students in Colorado were considered limited English proficient.
From Denver 7, Ann Trujillo, Bertha Lynn, Marty Caniglio, and Lionel Bienvenu. This is 7 News at 5.
English only. What's the best way to learn a language, all at once or a little at a time? It's an issue that you may have to decide at the ballot box. 7 News reporter Lance Hernandez is in our newsroom. And Lance, who is the group behind this initiative?
Well, Ann, this is a group of minority parents trying to wrestle control of the issue away from school boards. The question is whether immigrant school children are better off learning English at their own speed or learning it in a mandated crash course.
And I point my finger at them and I say, shame on them.
Latino activist Rita Montero says bilingual supporters have known for 25 years that existing programs are riddled with problems. The biggest, a lack of qualified teachers.
We're tired of our kids coming home with their test scores showing they're 2 and 3 years behind everybody else.
Grew up learning English. Why should they put him in a Spanish classroom?
Patricia Ramirez-San Lakota was stuck in a bilingual class even though he's fluent in English. She says that points to major problems.
Like everybody's different.
Eric Aguirre was in bilingual ed. He says it worked great for him. His mom, restaurateur Rosalinda Aguirre, is an immigrant who opposes English immersion.
That is the worst thing that it could happen to an immigrant child.
Rosalinda believes that early on, kids need to learn the basics in their own language so they won't get turned off by education.
Because if not, that's why we have so many dropouts.
Now, supporters of English immersion point to higher reading and language test scores in California as proof that immersion works better than the old method. Detractors say just because they can read English doesn't mean they can understand science and math.
Thank you, Lance. Now, after months of legal challenges, backers of an English immersion initiative say they'll have to scramble to get all the signatures necessary to get the issues on the ballot. They need 80,000 by early August, so you can expect to be asked to sign a petition at a grocery store near you.
You're watching Colorado's News Channel. This is News 4 at 10.
The rush is on this weekend to collect signatures for the November election. The group English for the Children has until August 5th to collect 80,000 signatures. And as News 4's Ana Alejo explains, their initiative would amend the state constitution on bilingual education.
Would you like to sign my petition, please?
Paid petition circulators are working day in and day out to meet a deadline that's just 3 weeks away.
We had approximately 6 weeks, more or less, to pick up 80,600 signatures. So we're scrambling, and I mean scrambling.
Hi, sir. You registered to vote?
Alcen su mano si quieren venir a la pizarra.
Supporters of English for the Children say immigrant students are not well served when they're taught in their native language. Bilingual education has been a failure, they say. The amendment would have all public school children not fluent in English be instructed only in English.
We have the ability to teach our kids Spanish where the schools don't. So let us do our job at home if it still is an important item to us. And the schools should teach them English because we can't teach them English, and they have the ability to do it.
The initiative's opponents have organized under the name English Plus. They say not all children can learn English through immersion. They call the initiative a one-size-fits-all curriculum that may not work for all students.
Our Constitution guarantees local communities the right to make those decisions. This would impose a curriculum statewide that has to be offered whether it's needed or not.
The initiative's outcome will directly affect 60 to 100,000 students in Colorado who speak limited English. That's nearly 10% of the public school population. Ana Alejo, News 4.
The proposed amendment would not affect foreign language classes for students who are fluent in English.
You're watching Colorado's News Channel. This is News 4 at 6.
Among the potential questions on this year's ballot is one challenging the value of bilingual education. Critics of the program say CSAP test results prove bilingual education just doesn't work. And as News 4's Terry Jessup reports, they have thousands of signatures backing them up.
Where are we setting them up?
Supporters of limiting bilingual education to no more than 1 year turned in nearly 140,000 signatures to the Secretary of State's office. They need just over 80,000 validated to get on November's ballot.
People across the state of Colorado know that this program has been a failure, and that's why you've seen the tremendous amount of signatures that we got.
Former Denver School Board member Rita Montero says last week's CSAP scores showed students in bilingual ed lag behind in every grade in every subject.
This isn't a new phenomena. This isn't something that just resulted in the last 2 or 3 years. This is something that's been going on for at least 30 years.
It will not pass in Colorado.
State Board of Education member Gully Stanford is leading the opposition.
Are there problems with English language acquisition? You bet there are. But bilingual education is part of the solution. We believe that there should be choice at the local level and that parents should have the right to choose the programs which best address the needs of their kids.
Similar English-only proposals passed overwhelmingly in Arizona and in California. 5 separate polls by Colorado media predict a similar outcome here. And there are signs the campaign is already getting emotional. Supporters claim petition gatherers were attacked in Fort Collins by 2 bilingual educators who told them they were fearful of losing their jobs. And the other side claims supporters have been paying people $10 or more to sign. It may well be the one issue in November where no one says, I don't have an opinion. Terry Jessup, News 4.
State election officials have 30 days to confirm that the required 80,571 valid signatures appear on the petition. Other prospective ballot initiatives voters may be asked to consider at the November general election on the 5th of November include a proposal to automatically send ballots through the mail for most elections, a plan to allow voters to register and vote on Election Day, and an initiative to inform or reform campaign contributions. Again, the general election is Tuesday, November 5th.
From Colorado's news leader, this is 9 News at 6.
5 initiatives will be on the Colorado ballot this November. Supporters had to get a certain number of signatures and turn them in by today. One initiative would allow people to register to vote on Election Day and then cast a ballot. Another would send ballots through the mail for almost all elections. There's also a measure to eliminate party caucuses, and another would ban direct corporate contributions to candidates and parties. Perhaps the most controversial measure focuses on bilingual education. A group that wants to limit bilingual education in Colorado today submitted more than 140,000 signatures to the Secretary of State's office. The group is called English for the Children. It wants voters to replace Colorado's current bilingual education system. 9 News education reporter Dana Knowles has more. Dana, they did have a rough start gathering all those signatures, didn't they?
They did, Jim. Just a few weeks ago, they only had 30,000 of the more than 80,000 valid signatures needed to get an initiative on the ballot. So at this point, they're fairly confident that the voters will be able to make a decision on this controversial proposal. 140,000 signatures on paper packed into these boxes are headed over to the Secretary of State's office. Signatures from Coloradans who want to eliminate bilingual education from the state's public schools.
We're all here saying today, that's it. We've had it. We've been saying that for a long time.
Rita Montero is the chairperson for the Colorado Campaign for English for the Children, the organization that gathered the signatures.
And the folks who are our opponents need to wake up, smell the coffee, and get with it. And realize once and for all that it's a failed program and that this is the way to go, and at least give another option a chance.
¿Cuántos ratones vamos a hacer?
Bilingual students would have to be immersed into English-only classes within 1 year. Most districts in the state immerse bilingual students within 2 or 3 years. Opponents of this initiative say it takes away a parent's right to choose.
It's a farce. They know it. The Supreme Court said the people can vote on it, but we're going to make it very clear that essentially this is the elimination of choice.
They also say immersing all bilingual students into English-only classes within 1 year assumes they can all learn at the same pace.
It doesn't do what it says it will do. Kids learn English in different ways and through different strategies. We need to offer choice.
Denver Public Schools has more bilingual children than any other district in the state. The district has been under federal court order for the last 3 years. Under that order, all bilingual students in the district must be immersed into English within 3 years. So unless this order is lifted, DPS would be exempt from any change in the state law. Jim?
Dana, they need 80,000 valid signatures. They came up with 140,000. Even if they end up throwing a few out, it certainly looks like it'll be on the ballot.
Yeah, even those opposed to this are pretty confident that this is going to be on the ballot.
All right, Dana Knowles, thanks very much. 9news.com has a lot more information on the election season for you, including links to the Secretary of State's office, candidate profiles, and sample ballots. Click on the blue newsroom button.
From Denver's 7, this is 7 News at 11.
And welcome back, everyone. I'm Steve Saunders.
And I'm Katie Trexler. Thanks for joining us. 1 week from today, thousands of people here in Colorado will head to the polls to vote in this year's primary election.
But the big election this year will, of course, come in November. And that is when Colorado voters will pick, among other things, a governor for the next 4 years, also elect a new 7th representative to the U.S. House, and vote on a growing list of ballot initiatives. 5 groups were able to successfully meet yesterday's deadline for submitting petitions for prospective ballot initiatives on the November ballot. This group wheeled in boxes and boxes of signatures to the Secretary of State's office. They want to allow people to be able to register to vote on Election Day. Another group that made the deadline supports English immersion. As 7 News reporter Shannon Brinney shows us this morning, Colorado spends about $3.3 million on bilingual education programs every year, and this group says we are not getting our money's worth.
Yo no tengo tarea.
Educators challenge how to bring non-native English speakers up to speed when language itself is a barrier. This group promises to do the heavy lifting to try and change Colorado's system. Today, they turn in the signed petition so voters can decide whether to eliminate Colorado's bilingual programs in favor of structured English immersion.
Immersion does work for some students, and we're not against immersion. We're just in favor of choice.
Board of Education member Gully Stanford spearheads the opposition. In California, the opposition to a similar measure lost by a landslide, and since then, some studies show test scores for non-English speakers improving dramatically.
Now, it's very difficult to admit that. Therefore, you do everything you possibly can to deny that fact.
Emotions are running so high that this signature gatherer, Jay Taylor, was allegedly accosted by a bilingual teacher.
This is tied directly to their livelihood.
I have no knowledge of that. We're going to debate this initiative on its merits, and the fact is it is lacking in merit.
Shannon Brinius, 7 News.
Right now, it is unclear how that initiative might impact Denver schools, since a federal mandate could override any state initiative.
There could be 5 initiatives on Colorado's November ballot. In addition to that bilingual education initiative, there's a proposal that would automatically send ballots through the mail for almost all elections. Also, one that would require Republican and Democrat candidates to get petitions rather than caucus backing for their races. A plan to allow voters to register and vote on Election Day, as Steve mentioned, and an initiative to reform campaign contributions.
So much for the gavel, eh? We're very sorry to have kept you all waiting. We know we're starting 15 minutes late, and we apologize. So thank you for waiting, and thank you for being here tonight. We have 3 individuals who are here about the bilingual program. Mrs. Olga Larson, Janine Chavez, and Claudia Alfaro. And you will have a total of 9 minutes. Excuse me? You will have a total of speaking for 9 minutes. Do you need any help with translation?
We'll take 3 minutes each one of us.
Okay.
Thank you for giving me a chance to speak, but I think it is a chance for me to speak about the bilingual education. I came to this country.
Can you just give us your name first, please?
Yeah. My name is Olga Larson. I came to this country in 1969. In 1984, it was my first encounter with the public schools when I put my kids to Dora Moore School. They were placed directly to bilingual education. Not because they were brown because I was Hispanic. My kids were light. They were white skin. And it took me 3 months to remove them from the bilingual education. It caused me headaches, pains, it caused ulcers, and therefore, I'm coming here to speak for the new bilingual education. You guys created another bilingual education, supported years after years for the bilingual education. If we all are here for the achievement of our kids, why are we having year after year the bilingual education that to me is destructive to our people? I'm here to speak for the rest of the people that comes behind me. And you know, how many of you members that you're listening have members of your family in the bilingual education? How many of your family? How many of your neighborhood? And it has a successful ending. Let me tell you, I do go school to high school to recruit students to come to college. I volunteer to 3 different elementary schools. I know firsthand that bilingual education is destructive to our people. I'm here is my beginning that will have no ending until this is changed. I was very depressed when the new bill came just a few weeks ago. You all voted unanimous, did not support the new bill. If you think the bilingual education is so good for the Hispanics, why did you not support that bill and make the people vote it? Why did not support to put it in the bill and us where to decide? Why are we constantly spending thousands of dollars in the bilingual education? And let me say this, I've only got 2 examples here, but I have hundreds. Since I volunteered to 3 different inner city elementary schools, I have parents that cry, depressed, upset, because they said, I've been here 3 years. My kids, ECE, kindergarten, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, they haven't moved. They said, I came miles away from my country, and still the Spanish were stunk. To me, I really think that this is a program to oppress my people, and I'm here not to stop. I will continue with this battle. And I have an example here. I hear over and over that says, kids cannot make it in their in English language. It has to be in Spanish. Well, I have one member that can tell you that came and successfully is going with a scholarship to University of Colorado. She had never took one course in Spanish. She came directly to the English program. And she has, like me, I have 14 members of my family that came from Peru. All of them went directly to English. There was no such a thing. They moved farther south where there's no such a thing that it says bilingual education, because they saw me suffer for years. But that didn't take me away. I still live in the Denver area, and I intend to live and fight for the others. Now, Rocio can tell you her experience when she came to the United States.
Thank you. Your mom used up part of your time, but that's all right. Go ahead.
Oh, she's not my mom.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize.
Oh, that's okay. My name is Rocio, and I came here in 1991 from Peru. And all my classes, when I started school, it was all English. Well, at the beginning, it was hard, but then I had to adjust. And, well, it hasn't caused me any trouble right now. It actually helped me to have all English classes, because in the university it's all English, so I had to learn, right? And I think it's better to have all English classes. That way you won't have difficulties in the future when you go to school. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you both very much.
I guess you don't have any questions for me.
Well, I assume there's a third person who's going to speak on the same topic,
Yes.
and then we will make some comments and questions. Yes, it's your turn now. Please step forward. Adelante, por favor. Es su turno. Si necesita ayuda, ella puede traducir para usted.
Mi nombre es Claudia Alfaro.
My name is Claudia Alfaro.
No estoy de acuerdo con las clases bilingües
I don't agree with the bilingual classes
porque mi pequeño hijo lo hicieron perder 2 años.
because my little child lost 2 years.
Repitió primer grado
He had to repeat first grade
por culpa del español,
because of Spanish,
porque desde pequeño
because from the time that he was little,
estuvo en guarderías,
he was in nursing
daycare,
daycare
donde solo se hablaba inglés.
where everybody spoke English.
Cuando lo fui a matricular,
When I went to register him,
porque no hablaba inglés,
because he didn't speak English,
me dijeron que tenía que estar en bilingüe clase.
they told me that he had to be in a bilingual class.
Pero el bilingüe class no es solamente español.
But the bilingual class was only Spanish.
El año pasado
Last year,
yo hablé con la directora y su maestra
I spoke to the principal and the teacher
para que este año, segundo grado,
so that this year, second grade,
estuviera en inglés solamente.
he could be only in English.
Ellos me entregaron todas estas hojas
They gave me all these sheets
para que en 3 meses
so that in 3 months
el niño aprendiera inglés en sus vacaciones.
the child could learn English during his vacation.
Eso me hace sentir mal
This makes me feel very bad
porque el niño no aprende esto en 3 meses.
because the child cannot learn this in 3 months.
Mi hijo mayor
My oldest son
es nacido en Honduras
was born in Honduras.
y a la edad de mi hijo pequeño
At the same age as my youngest child,
hablaba inglés y escribía inglés
he spoke and wrote English,
y no nacido en Estados Unidos.
and he was not born in the United States.
Pienso que eso ha atrasado a mi hijo.
I think that this has made my son be late or be delayed.
La maestra de lectura de la escuela
The reading teacher at the school,
platiqué con ella una vez
I talked to her once,
diciéndole
telling her
que no estaba de acuerdo con las clases bilingües.
to tell her that I did not agree with the bilingual classes.
Y ella me dijo
And she told me
que contó con los dedos los niños
she counted in her fingers the children
que llegan a 5º grado
that arrive at 5th grade
leyendo perfecto inglés.
reading perfect English.
Entonces pienso que no es correcto la clase bilingüe.
So I think that the bilingual classes are not correct.
El español lo enseñamos en casa.
Spanish we teach them at home.
Okay, ahora hay algunas preguntas. Now we have a few questions. So Benny's going to speak first in Spanish. And
Not yet.
Go for it, Benny.
We're working on it, but not yet. It's not ready for public consumption.
¿Qué dijo?
oh, is there somebody else? Oh, I'm sorry.
¿Qué dijo primero del español?
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Why don't we had an extra person in there that I wasn't aware. Why don't you come forward and why don't you finish? Is that, or Benny, did you want to comment now?
Well, I had a particular question about this package of material. Am I understanding that that package of material was given like for it to be read over the summer, and that was going to be the condition for that child to go into an English classroom?
No, pregunta si
¿El niño?
Las hojas que le dieron era como la condición de que él pudiera terminar eso.
No, era para que ayudara.
It was to help.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay, okay. And were you ever told that as a parent you have the option of that child not being in the bilingual program?
Y usted como madre le habían indicado que tenía la opción
No, solamente me dijeron que porque yo no hablaba inglés tenía que ponerlo en bilingüe.
No, they only told me that because I didn't speak English, he had to be in bilingual.
See, this is another example of a policy not being implemented the way this Board of Education has said for that policy to be implemented. So we need to look into that, and I'll ask the superintendent to investigate that. Because you freely have the option of not having your child in a bilingual classroom.
Ay, no. Incluso cuando me dijeron lo que era bilingüe clase, me dijeron que era 50 inglés y 50 español, y no fue así.
They had also told me that when they explained to me what was the bilingual program like, they told me that it was going to be 50% Spanish and 50% English, and that was not so.
¿En qué escuela está su hijo?
En SNCC.
Skink. Entonces, ¿ese ocurrió en esa escuela?
Sí.
Ok, muy bien.
Thank you.
Gracias. And I apologize, I didn't mean to overlook you.
Oh, no, that's fine. I understood that there was be a little problem here. Okay, my name is Janine Chavez, and because my last name is Spanish, I am constantly receiving newsletters, articles, brochures, pamphlets in Spanish. And one of the reasons why I am here is because I have example after example of things that are written in Spanish. The Spanish is very poor. You have spelling mistakes, poor sentence structure. I have this, the Denver police were kind enough to give me this. Here it says, no cruces in Spanish, and this is misspelled. This is a very typical mistake of the kind of Spanish that you see out there, the level of Spanish that you see out there. And so my question is, I would like to know what the name of all of the teachers that are teaching in the bilingual education program, from what colleges or universities they have gotten their degrees in the languages which they're teaching. I would like to know the standards that have been set for vocabulary, grammar for each grade that the children are in the schools. When do they learn about the accents, conjugation of the verbs, sentence structure, the types of speech and that, and when do they also learn it in English? When, in whatever languages they're learning, I would like to know who sets the standards, what they are for each grade, and what the expectations are as far as vocabulary and everything when they finish school, or when they finish their bilingual education. And I would also like to know what literature they are being given in both languages, in Spanish and in English, or in whatever language in English, if that is possible.
I think what you're asking really is what are the competencies and capabilities of the teachers that are teaching in our English language acquisition program.
Or bilingual education program, whatever you want to call it. Whoever is teaching the children in any language other than English.
I'm going to ask the superintendent if she can respond to that.
Okay.
Mr. Jose Perea, who is the director of our English language acquisition program, is in the adjoining room.
Mm-hmm.
And I would ask that he meet you out here so that he can connect with you, get your name, get your telephone number, how he can get in touch with you, and he will be a good source of information for you, and he is here tonight. So.
And I would also like to know if I could see the lectura test that these children are being given instead of the ITBS, alongside the ITBS, so I can see exactly where they are, if they are at the same levels.
I have no idea if
that
that is a test that can be shared, but certainly that is a question that you can ask Mr. Perea.
Okay.
And let me also respond that the ITBS this year is optional for elementary schools. It's no longer mandatory.
So no tests are given to the children, or tests are given to the children, but not the ITBS, or?
CSAPS, which is the state test, which is a much longer test, and it's with that test that schools will be held accountable and will be graded.
Okay.
So,
and do they have an equivalent for that in Spanish or whatever other language a child may be studying?
There is a Spanish version of the CSAP in the elementary school grades at the 3rd and 4th grade level.
And could I see those? Would it be possible? Or I need
Well,
to...
we can't see them.
Oh, you
we can't
see
see the English, so I doubt that we could give you they're not
Well, could I
shared.
at least find out who creates the test, who writes them, and what their credentials are?
Publishing company. You can contact the state for that because the state does it. Call the State Department of Education, but that's out of our hands.
Okay.
Every school district in the state of Colorado is required, and we have been fighting hard to make sure that the state will pay for the Spanish version of the test. They've only agreed to do it at certain grade levels and not all grade levels.
Okay. And I also just wanted to mention one more thing. Schenck is not the only school where this is occurring. I have met many people who have had their children placed into bilingual education against their will. They have gone to the administrators, they have gone to the teachers, they have gone to the principals, and they have been told that they have to have their children in bilingual education, that they cannot remove them from the programs. I know two parents who removed their children from the Denver Public Schools completely and placed them and homeschooled them because they could not get them out of the bilingual education program. And they didn't speak Spanish. The children didn't speak Spanish. The parents didn't speak Spanish. No one spoke Spanish in the home.
As you hear of these people, it would help us if you could, either they could contact us directly, or you can get their names and you can help us with that, because we do not want that to be happening. And
yes, I'm having them write me letters.
That would be
that I could send to
and
you.
don't go away yet, because Mr. Milner has a comment, and maybe...
Yes.
I didn't know she was finished, though.
Yes, I'm finished.
Okay. More of a comment than a question. You know, for several years, particularly on this Board of Education, there was indications that there was a silent majority out there, if you will, concerning bilingual education. And for so many times, we just hear the proponents. And so it's a change. It's a little different, and maybe it's a bubbling rebellion. I'm not sure, but I just wanted to thank you for all of you for coming and sharing a different perspective, and to show that in any community there is no monolithic group that has sway over that direction. So appreciate you just coming forward with some of that.
Okay.
We want to look into these implementation pieces because that's always a concern.
Please, yes. Thank you.
She said maybe not the evaluation that they're going to give you right now for the speaking Spanish student. And that is one question that I have in the evaluation.
You know, you may want to talk to Jose Perea, because we are not going to be aware of the specifics that you're about to raise, and he wants to talk to you, and he is waiting for you. I want to reiterate what Mr. Milner said as well. Parents have a choice. If they're not being given that choice, we as board members and the superintendent, we need to hear about that. The other thing I want to add is that we have some schools that are only doing English immersion. We have about 3 or 4 elementary schools that are only doing English immersion. And if you want the names of those schools,